Before we start, I just thought I'd make one observation from my 7 years of working closely with corporations, my perch as the chairman of the Corporate Eco Forum, which is a collection of about 70 global companies, $3 trillion worth of combined revenues, kind of a safe space for very senior executives of the vice president and C-level to kind of let their hair down and talk without media, NGOs, just peer-to-peer about how it's working and trying to make sustainability part of their business strategy. And we've seen this remarkable shift, or at least I have over the last 7 years, from a lot of companies talking about responsibility, the theme of this meeting, from the perspective of responsibility to society, to a point today where a lot more companies, as Usha was talking about earlier, are now talking about responsibility to their bottom lines, to their shareholders, to their own very futures of their companies. It's been an exciting shift, and these companies, I think, are seeing that the writing is on the wall. We're headed into a profoundly different future where the past is not a reliable guide in any case, a resource-constrained, climate-disrupted world with altogether new risks and opportunities. And they aren't waiting around for consumers to push them into action or for governments to change the rules, but rather they are increasingly filling the leadership void where governments simply aren't acting fast enough or on the scale required. So we're going to dive into several examples of that kind of leadership, far-sighted business leadership today. And I'd like to begin with some questions first around agriculture with Gyanendra Shukla from Monsanto. So let's talk a little bit about the business role in making agriculture more sustainable. We have on the one hand a big challenge where we know we have to dramatically increase food and feed and fiber production in order to meet rising demands, growing population, middle class around the world. On the other hand, we're running out of arable land. We're running out of space to do that, and climate disruption looms large. So how is it that Monsanto is approaching this? Can you give us some highlights of how you're thinking about this work?
Well, a couple of things. One thing is, as of all of you would know, agriculture is very core for economic growth. It's core for, if you're in this part of the world, even urbanization, people moving from rural India to urban becomes a problem. Availability of food can become a problem. Pricing of the food can become a problem. So agriculture is really at the crossroad and then you worry about, we talk about 9 billion people in say 2015. Out of those 9 billion people, most of them are going to get added in this part of the world we're sitting. So it becomes really very challenging. How do you deal? The way we have been thinking is that, look, it is not going to take one Monsanto to solve this problem. It is going to take a very ecosystem type of approach. We will have a role to play, but I think a large role will be played by governments because agriculture is just not seed, is just not soil, is just not water. I think all of them are very important. But there are several actors in the whole ecosystem will play a very important role, including for poor farmer debt, risk. All of us heard about severe environmental damages happening in Philippines recently, India recently. It keeps happening all the time. As our previous speaker said, these are not random things. They're happening more regularly. So we need to prepare for this. From our perspective, we recognize, I think, it's very important, and sustainability of agriculture system, not only from the perspective of me, it's for the company, it's for the farmer, it's for the society, is very important. We recognize it, and we actually have made firm commitment in 2008. We said, look, we will help agriculture be more sustainable in the areas we operate. We made a commitment that will help farmers produce more. Commitment is by 2030, farmers will be able to double their yield. We also said farmers will have to use less resources, which means lesser of soil, lesser of input, lesser of water. And also we think we have a responsibility to help millions of small farmers in the developing world. And when we want to do this, I think the way we're trying to do it is really trying to make commitment to the research, because we believe innovation will drive a lot of things. Today when I operate in India, if somebody is asking me what is your biggest challenge, I would say, look, my biggest challenge is, can I get policy attention? But there's a larger operational challenge, which I will have to find solution with my partners. And so there are millions of farmers to be taught how to farm, how to be more sensitive to the current environment, what are the things they can do to improve their soil, what are the things they can do to improve their water. So the biggest challenge is, how can I, in a very speedy manner, reach to every farmer on the earth? Or in India, where you have to go to 8 million farmers, infrastructure is poor, they're not as well connected as developing parts of the earth. So what is that ecosystem I can create? And I think we're trying to look at more holistically. We know we can't do it alone. We also know there's a name associated with us. We also know there are people have views about production agriculture versus what you call natural agriculture. We are taking a lot of initiatives where we think public-private partnerships, civil society partnerships, research collaborations, a lot of things can be done, and we are taking several initiatives in those partnerships to make difference.
Great. Can you give us a couple examples of where you have real-world success stories of this playing out, where you're on the one hand increasing yields and doing things to increase people's livelihoods and improve people's livelihoods today, but also safeguarding that natural capital and natural infrastructure so we can keep doing that going on in the future?
I can give you several examples. So cotton is one such example, and probably our colleagues from Levi's would know it. Cotton was a crop in late 90s was dying in the country, and it was dying because farmers were just not able to manage one particular pest. They were spraying 20 times insecticide, they were getting exposed to severe doses of pesticides, and they were not able to grow cotton successfully. That's the time, through our biotechnological innovation, we got a technology called BT cotton. And we were not in the seed business. We knew this technology, to reach to the farmer, it has to reach in this choice of seed which farmer will have. So we partnered with 40 Indian companies in the country, 40 Indian seed companies. We licensed them technology, and because they knew those customers at the local level, they were quickly able to take those technologies to the farmer, because these days you also have to ensure technology cannot take ages to reach everyone. It has to be almost probably maybe similar to our faster than mobile technology, where as soon as technology comes, make sure it penetrates everybody. So partnership with the NGOs, partnership with the governments at the state level really helped ensure. I mean, today India was never in the reckoning. They were always a net importer of the cotton. They're the second largest exporter. Yields have doubled. Now tons of less pesticide is being used. Every farmer in the country is adding $2.5 billion of extra money in their pocket. If you add up 30,000 acres of the farm, and on a very conservative basis, if you accounted benefit at $100, $2.5 billion of money which goes in the rural hands, it helps a lot in using that money for healthcare, education, and various other social needs. I can tell you, it is very touching when people are getting their kids married. They send us a marriage card. In India, marriage card is a big thing. We get marriage cards where I say, look, courtesy Bolgard cotton technology. Had it not been for this technology, probably would not have been able to marry our kids. Their kids going, I mean, you can see computers in the villages. You can see, people naming their names as white gold. White gold stands for cotton. So there's so many examples. Similar examples are there in Philippines. Similar examples, we're trying to collaborate with the state governments, and the country is a large country with 130 million partners. I can go on talking. I mean, technology can make so much of difference to agriculture, and this is a clear example of helping produce more, less pesticides from the same land. You are able to double the use, so your crop efficiency per unit of water use is pretty high.
Terrific. Let's turn now to Indonesia and hear from Simon Badcock from CI. You've got this tremendous experience working on the ground in rural settings, trying to get things done. A lot of obstacles, a lot of opportunities. Give us a sense of what some of the opportunities are and some of the challenges you're facing there.
Yeah, thanks, PJ. So before I'll put it into the context of CI, Conservation International is a global organization, has operations in about 24 countries. One of the program that I'm currently involved with is a Sustainable Landscapes Partnership. And today, as we've discussed many of these issues that are key to addressing some of the challenges, but also the opportunities occur at a landscape setting. So part of my kind of journey over the last 20 years was to come from a conservation background and then morphed into agribusiness and agriculture. And I see one of the challenges, but a huge opportunity, is to translate all of the information, knowledge, and skills and experience that we have collectively in forums like that into case studies and practical working models in the field. 2 days ago, I was in North Sumatra, west coast of North Sumatra, talking very in depth with some rubber farmers. One of the key things, I think, is that the technology and innovation that can make significant differences to local people is not highly sophisticated. And a very small example, by providing people with different cutting tools and the knowledge to understand how to utilise and to use appropriate methods, resulted in increased productivity of 40% there and then. So that's just a very small illustrative example. And why is that important? Because increasing additional revenues into some of these local economies is part of an approach to sustainable production. Part of CI's philosophy, couched in the context of the Sustainable Landscapes Partnership, is to look at healthy sustainable societies. Now, what does that mean? We're focusing on three kind of core elements. That is the natural capital reservoirs that provide ecosystem services as well as have high conservation value and that supply the kind of core necessary fundamental elements to civil society and societies in these locations. And as was touched upon earlier, in terms of the supply chain, it begins with some of these watersheds. Going on to the next phase is how do we promote or support sustainable production? Well, that can be through a range of different opportunities in terms of helping farmers understand the types of commodities they have, access to markets, different inputs, which is really fundamental. And I think the really big gap is that it doesn't actually take a lot to make a huge difference. Part of the challenge that we collectively face is to be able to find mechanisms and approaches in some of these more remote production areas to be able to help these stakeholders, the equity players, the local private companies that are operating there, the local communities, civil society organisations, as well as the government to better understand the intersection between the ecosystems, natural capital, and then the sustainable production. I think that's one of the big challenges moving forward.
And as you reflect on everything that you've learned and what's worked and what hasn't worked, if you could issue a couple of recommendations to a couple of key players, whether business or government, whomever, what would be top of your list?
Well, I think for many of the people here, they're already aware of some of these fundamental issues that have to be addressed in terms of accounting for the externalities and the natural capital, how it should inform the way people do business, but translating that into action on the ground. If you look at Indonesia with 238 million people, you have something like 50 million people that are involved in agriculture across a range of different value chains. So for companies that are not yet engaged or understand necessarily the relationship between this business, currently it's your short-term versus long-term, it's about looking at working together in alliances. These are some very kind of challenging issues that need coalitions where people that have experience, whether it's training or capacity building, or have an understanding of how to measure and apply some of these other kind of principles in terms of the true cost approach to measuring natural capital. But it requires policymakers, commitment, leadership, other equity players in the landscape, private sector, companies, beginning on the ground, together working with other companies up and down the supply chain that can work together. One of the things that I think I've also noticed, and it varies a great degree between different value chains, is the extent to which there is a huge amount of knowledge and information, reservoirs that are tapped and locked inside these companies. And part of one approach is to unlock that in terms of in providing high quality inputs. And we've done quite a lot of work with companies successfully in terms of working together with them, providing high quality inputs and materials to farmers that make a difference in terms of their production. But again, the next challenge is how do you actually mitigate, reduce the kind of potential for intensification leading to extensification. And that also needs clear market signals. And as a lot of the industry is trying to pursue is how do we get the traceability in our supply chains? How do we make sure that what we're doing in terms of supporting increased incomes and the opportunities for some of these producers in these rural settings doesn't result in increased degradation to the remaining natural capital reservoirs.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. Michael, as we talk about business's role in solving a lot of these issues and tackling all those things, the theme of collaboration comes up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And you and I had an interesting conversation a bit in the hallway about collaboration and competition. And I'm wondering if you could give everyone a sense of how you think about this and how Levi thinks about pre-competitive collaboration and competition in the context of all these challenges and opportunities.
Okay. Collaboration and competition. So I will answer you with a question, and this question is for the audience. This is how we think about it. How many of you own a pair of Levi's? Raise your hand. Come on, who owns Levi's? Raise your hand. That's what I'm talking about. It's about competition, actually. And when I say that, I'm saying that half jokingly, but actually, I've been at Levi's for 15 years. And we've been through a lot of collaborations. We've collaborated on many things. What we've learned is collaboration is time-consuming, It is slow, it is incremental, and when done well, it can result in impact and systemic change, but it's very rare that that happens in a collaboration. And so while we hear lots of talk about collaboration and companies collaborating is going to change the world and solve all our problems, I think it's one tool in the toolbox. But let's realize that companies are established not to collaborate, but to compete. That's what we do. We compete. And so while certain problems and challenges, systemic ones, like developing more sustainable cotton, are great areas for collaboration, eliminating hazardous chemicals in the supply chain, we have to collaborate on that. Global labor standards, factory conditions, working conditions, we've got to collaborate on that, right? But we need to compete with each other on our products and services and delivering more sustainable products and services to the consumer. And on that, I agree with my colleague from Unilever. The consumer has to drive a lot of this change. And if we can do that, we'll accelerate the change, we'll get it going faster and faster, and we'll create the kind of accelerated change and impact that we need to address the problems that we're all concerned about.
That's great. So what are a couple of examples of collaborations that have actually worked pretty well for you, and areas where you're actually able to harness some of the marketing benefits and some of the revenue upside of sustainability?
Great. I mean, there's two. One is something called the Better Cotton Initiative, which is a multi-stakeholder group. The big companies, us, so Levi's, IKEA, Marks and Spencer, H&M are involved. But we also involve other supply chain actors. The big cotton traders are involved. The farmers are involved. Global NGOs are involved. WWF is involved. So this is one where we actually are doing some of the things we're talking about. Reducing impacts, reducing water, chemical use, improving farmer incomes, and actually getting something that is priced the same as conventional cotton so we can scale it globally. So that's a collaboration that works, I think, very well.
Great. Well, switching gears entirely, I want to talk to Ron a bit from ABB, which is one of the largest engineering companies in the world, and they are a global leader in a lot of the technologies that really undergird our modern life, and particularly around power and automation. And I know a lot of us are thinking about how technology could really help us in dramatic ways address a lot of the challenges that were on the agenda today. Can you give us a sense of how some of the technologies that ABB is developing and working on already are actually helping being applied to solve some of the questions that we're talking about at this meeting?
Surely, yeah. Shukla a little bit earlier spoke about how technology can change agriculture. Well, technology can change the way we live in cities, and ABB is a company that derives more than half of its revenues from energy efficient products, support for renewable sources of energy, the harnessing of that to the power grids. So it's part of what we do, and our customers are constantly demanding more for less. That we become ever more resource efficient. You've asked me for an example. I'll give you one slightly flag-waving example, which proves that much of the technology that we need to live in a more energy efficient world already exists. It's already proven, it's already out there. And this example is taken from industry, where motors consume 2/3 of all electricity in industry. We've developed something called variable speed drive, which is essentially a gearbox, which allows a motor to operate at the speed at which it needs to operate, rather than at a preset or fixed speed. The savings from those drives are absolutely enormous. If my memory serves me well, per year, our installed base of variable speed drives saves something like 250 terawatt hours of electricity, which translated into human terms is the equivalent of 80 million EU households. Just, this is a plain, simple gearbox well, it's not that simple to be honest, but for industry, for motors and industry, those kind of technologies are available, and you know, other companies have similar technologies which can be used readily within urban settings.
Terrific. We have a lot of people in the audience here who are either advising businesses, working in businesses, who are thinking increasingly about sustainability, and you've spent quite a bit of your career thinking about sustainability in the context of a company. Any big recommendations from your lessons learned, things to avoid, things to focus on that would help people as they think about accelerating their journey, their company's journey that they're working with towards greater sustainability in a way that's good for the business?
Yeah, I hesitate to make any big pronouncements, but 2 or 3 quick recommendations. One is innovate for tomorrow. I work for a company that spends well over $1 billion a year and has 8,000 technologists working around the world on innovation. And just to give you one example of an extraordinary innovation that many companies have been seeking to, a problem many companies have been seeking to resolve for over 100 years, came to pass earlier this year. Now, I'm not going to go into technological detail because that will just bore everybody, but a circuit breaker for an ultra-high voltage direct current grid, sounds exciting, doesn't it? Is going to, and that's something that we found a solution for earlier this year. That is going to revolutionize power grids in the years to come. It is going to be possible to have direct current supergrids for tomorrow, interconnecting countries, continents, harnessing enormous quantities of renewable energy, huge amounts, and in an energy efficient and low loss manner. So it's just one example, which has now been recognized internationally, of the need to innovate. 2 other quick points. It really is time to stop talking about sustainability and business as separate entities. A lot of companies still do that, and it really is time to bring the sustainability folk in from that cupboard along the end of the corridor, and really harness their knowledge to the business. That's a simple way of saying that it is time to really harness sustainability within all aspects of the business across the value chain, from the R&D side of things through to the recycling end of life cycle end of the process. So it really is time to get rid of the sustainability and business divide. Last point, and it's probably not a point that's going to be raised at this conference, which is why I raise it. Stakeholder expectations are changing rapidly, and a wise company is going to be a company that listens. And I have been listening a lot to investors, to customers, to NGOs in recent months. And the demand for good social performance, the demand for the corporate world to respect human rights is growing, and legislation and conventions and treaties and guidelines are being produced to support that. So I think a successful company of the future is going to be one that is constantly listening.
Terrific. Ike, I want to talk to you about Ricoh's strategy, because as you know, I've been a long admirer of Ricoh because I think it has embedded sustainability into the DNA of the company. You devise corporate strategy thinking about sustainability as very much as connected to business goals. How do you do that? I mean, how is it that you get the company to think about corporate strategy, life cycle thinking, long-term planning, and so forth? How does that work when you're setting strategy, setting your corporate goals, and your action steps?
Thank you. Unlike Levi's, our business is our business for others' business. So this means our customer is other business people through imaging equipment or other business solutions for them to better work in environmentally friendly manners. So rather than protecting our profit, we need to think about how society or our customer is seeking to have from us. So we have our corporate logo over there, Ricoh. Underneath, we add our corporate tagline, that is emerging and change. Emerging means emerging from the future. Maybe 2050 or 2020, we set our environmental sustainability goal in 2050, and the medium-term goal is 2020. And backcasting from the future, we need to change our mindset from can-do thinking to should-do thinking. Can-do means based upon the current capability, we can do like this much. This is a kind of improvement, but the improvement is not good enough to answer to the social changing issue. And instead, innovation, thinking from the future, is our corporate value. So our company manufactures copier, fax, printer, scanner, and those are individual equipment. But we try to combine it into single unit, which is good for resource conservation or energy conservation. But for some people say, why you kill yourself? Because we'd better to sell 4 individual devices rather than the 1 single device, because corporate revenue is more. In this way of thinking, short term is good, but the long term, customer want to have a space saving, energy saving, resource saving, rather than protecting our profit in the shorter period of time. But we need to foresee what is requested or expected to our business, for their business. In that way of thinking, we are requested by many organizations to innovate technology for that they can work environmentally friendly manner while maintaining the productivity. So for that, we have various solutions for their business. So our business is to help them, help other companies to do business in better manner. Right. So this is a kind of our survival game. And even though short-term profit is not good direction, but in the long term, our company can be surviving for the future.
Can you give us an example of an innovation or a product that's come out of that kind of thinking?
Yes. One of the very practical example is we have a technical prototype machine over there in the next door that is battery-powered imaging equipment. When I had some discussion in the US, and some Harvard Medical School professor talked to me, hey, Ike, I'm working in Africa, one place to the other, to medical support. I have a Honda power generator, but that is not good enough to operate your imaging equipment. So, hey, Ricoh, you can take battery-supported imaging equipment so that the machine can work. And this type of demand is very much interesting demand for us. And also in much developing nations, base of the pyramid, 4 billion people out of total 7 are very much struggling for the power outage. And for those people, we can provide our imaging equipment. Then, like a police station or hospitals, there is a mission critical our customer who like to continue business and while printing or while output something, even in the power outage situation. So listening to our customer and society, we need to provide something solution for them to keep running their business. So by doing so, we can ensure our business prosperity in long term in the future.
Terrific, thank you very much. Philippe, You have an illustrious career in the private sector, and you're also now working as well in the nonprofit sector at the World Business Council. And I wonder, as you think about all of these increasingly ambitious goals and raising the bar for what companies are doing around the world on these big, daunting issues, I know oftentimes we want to step back and say, hey, is that really going to be enough? Is that going to help us stave off some of the worst effects of climate change, prevent some of the worst degradation to critical ecosystems and so forth? And the World Business Council has actually been doing some really important work to help us all methodologically approach that question in a more systematic way. Can you tell us a little bit about how BCSD is helping us evaluate, is it enough, what companies are doing?
Yeah, thank you. A few years ago, WBCSD wrote a paper called 2050, Vision 2050. And it was describing the world that we wanted to have in 2050, where 9 billion can live well in the limit of the planet. So although this paper is still absolutely a great vision of what we have to do, we decided, exactly because what you said, that it was time perhaps to focus and to energize the business world with a shorter term action, and then we work on the 2020 action plan. And what is the 2020 is that we started from the science with the Stockholm Resilience Institute, and we have chosen 9 areas of focus where we think that if we don't do something, we will not be very happy in 2050, because if you don't go through a certain number of things in 2020, 2050 is an unreachable dream. So because we are pragmatic, we are business, it's in our DNA, we work on the 2020 in this 9 areas. You have climate change, you have water, you have food, fibers, etc., but also a social area that we have been working. I will give you an example of climate change. This is the area that I am taking care of. So we start writing what we call the must-have, which is what we absolutely must achieve in 2020 if we want to be successful. And for the climate change area, the 2020 must-have is we must transform the system of energy and industry. It looks simple, but when CEOs of 200 big companies representing trillions of sales and millions of people write that and sign this, it's something which I think can really change and scale up. So we must change the system, because we cannot cross the 1 trillion carbon accumulated in the atmosphere barrier. We know that we should peak somewhere, but the problem is not to peak, the problem is not to cross this barrier. We should recognize that development is necessary, because we can all dream that we will stop developing, but we all know that this is absolutely unacceptable for most of the people on Earth, so we have to recognize this. And because we are also pragmatic, we decided that we need to adapt to climate change, because we can deny it, but it's a fact. And our businesses, and I have listened a lot of good story here, our business must adapt to climate change. So these are the 3 must-have that we're going to concentrate it. So we didn't stop there. We took a few small companies like Shell, Exxon, and these kind of people, and they say, okay, what can you do on this area? And so they have all chosen 1 or 2 actions, and I can give you the first 5 actions that we have chosen. We are still elaborating lists, but the number 1 is we're going to work on forest as carbon sink, because we think we are very close to really use these assets, but we are not good enough. So we're going to work on this. The second thing, and I know that this is not politically correct, but this is the business decision, which is not politically correct by definition. We said we can all dream that we're going to make only with renewable and energy efficiency, but this is a dream. The reality is we're going to continue to use fossil fuel. So if we don't want to fry the planet, we have to put back this carbon when it belongs, which is 2,000 meters below the ground. And we're going to work seriously on carbon capture and storage. When I say seriously, is that we have to convince the people that the solution works, because it works, that is efficient and competitive, because it's efficient and competitive, and we need to put in place the policy that protects the stakeholders' interest, but also allow this solution. We are working also on two other solutions of electrification. One is electrifying cities for zero emission. Because we want it or not, low emission is not enough. We're going to go to zero emission. Now, let's start with the cities, because cities will be the problem. And I know that a lot of these gentlemen here are interested in this, and they will join the efforts. The fourth one is we need to bring electricity where there is no electricity. Because if we don't bring this electricity, these people will need anyway power. And then it will be a diesel engine story. And if it's a diesel engine story, I have nothing against diesel engine. I've been selling diesel engine for 20 years. But if it's a diesel engine story, we're going to fry the planet for sure. So we have to bring low emission solution for these people. So working with the renewables, but also with energy efficiency. And this, for example, is being sponsored by ABB and by ESCOM. So these people know they have the technology, they have the wish, and they will be successful. So for all this area, we are doing this. All these actions should be scalable, measurable, and they have a big sponsor behind them. And we hope, doing this, that we will energize the business world and bring some real solution. Not everywhere, but at least enough not to cross the boundary.
So very quickly, before we turn to questions from the audience, you were just at the Warsaw negotiations last week on climate change, and many people would argue that in order to get there by 2020, you do need some action on the policy front to set some parameters and some incentives for innovation to happen on the scale required. How did it go from your perspective? What are we looking at for the next round in 2015?
Well, this morning the minister said that he was pessimistic. You will cut me because I'm too, no, okay. I'm trying to talk about minister, they are cutting me. No. He said that he was pessimistic. I was in Warsaw, all right, as business leader. And I was, you know where? In a side event.
In the what?
Side event. Why? Because you have all these people there in a big stadium playing, and the business is in side event. Means that you are not part of the game. They all say that they need the business to implement the solution, but they keep us in side events. Outside. As we are not stupid, sometimes we are in very nice hotel, but sometimes in dark room inside the stadium. So I think this is the first thing why I am not pessimistic, but slightly depressed. You see,
Me too.
you cannot say, okay, we want business playing with politicians and politicians staying in a stadium and us is side events. And by the way, and after that I will go to what give me a lot of hope. Also, what the feeling that you get there is that now the name of the game is to maintain the process, to make sure that the process goes on. The result, it's a byproduct. So it's not really a problem. We need to maintain the process alive. And you know, in business, when you have this, when you have somebody saying that he's not optimistic about getting the result, and he is part and responsible of the process. In business, you say, okay, let's discuss, because if you are responsible of the target, you don't believe in your target, either we change the target and then forget climate change, or you change the team, because you cannot play around like that. So this is what makes me slightly depressed. What makes me very optimistic is that in all these side events, these people here, they are working seriously, and they are bringing solutions. They have the technology. They want, because they know, not because they are altruistic, but because they know they cannot be successful in the world in shambles. So they are changing. So now they need the politician and the political world to have a level playing field. But they will take the lead. So that's why I'm so optimistic.
I vote to put you and Usha as the head of the new team. Let's open up the floor briefly before we transition. Yes. Could we get a microphone up here in the front? Sorry, right up here. There you go. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Renee. I'm directing my question to Michael Kobori and picking up on your statement earlier that the consumer has to drive the change. By the way, I see you're making an eco statement because you're wearing your recycled Levi jeans.
These are the waterless Levi's, but yes, go on.
Yes.
Yes.
So my question is the 4-in-1 question. First, how has all these eco initiatives added to your cost of the fabrication and the manufacture of your jeans? And are the consumers receptive to paying a higher price for these jeans? And if they are, how does that add to your brand premium, and how do you deal with the competition?
Okay. So I will take your last question first in terms of the consumer, right? The consumer is not going to pay more for any environmentally friendly product at all. That is what all of our market research shows. That's what all of our market research shows. That is what the behavior shows, right? Consumers are not going to pay more for sustainable product, right? And actually, if natural capital succeeds and TEEB succeeds, then consumers will probably pay less for sustainable product, right? Let's think about that. If all the externalities are internalized, the more sustainable product will actually cost less, right? That's the point. That's the point of all of this, right? Now, in terms of our own work with our products, you asked about cost, and cost increases for more sustainable product. So I'm wearing a pair of what we call Levi's waterless jeans that we designed. We worked with our suppliers to figure out a way to get the same look, because the consumer wants from our products everything they always get. They want great quality, they want a great price, they want a pair of jeans that makes your butt look good, they want all of that, right? But they want it to be more sustainable. So we said, how do we get everything that they always want using less water? So that's what we design, that's what we work with our suppliers on. Well, guess what? If your suppliers use less water, they use less energy to heat the water, their costs are reduced. So actually these jeans cost less, right? They cost less than the manufacturing process to make, okay? So supplier saves money, we save money, and guess what? We take this to the consumer and we market it to the consumer. And we started 3 years ago with 0 waterless jeans. Today, we have 29 million of these every year. 29 million jeans that use less water. They use 330 million fewer liters of water every year to make these jeans. So it's better for the planet, it's better for the consumer, it's better for our suppliers, because guess what? We're not telling our suppliers to reduce their water consumption by 5% every year, and it's some incremental regulatory or compliance program. We're saying if you reduce water, we're going to give you more business. And they love that, right? That's what they're all about. So you get this great flywheel effect going, right? We increase the demand for this product, the suppliers want to do it, they save money, and guess what? We get that change that we're talking about.
We're just short on time, so I just want to take 2 more questions in a row from the audience, and then we'll give the panelists the last word. Actually, let's just take these 3 really quickly. The gentleman over in the aisle over here. And if you could just introduce yourself as well.
Hi there, thank you. My name is Justin Gabois, and I'm the head of sustainability for Merceline in Asia Pacific. So, agreeing with Mr. Kobori, Michael, we find the same thing from our own experiences with customers like yourselves, that although that we may have maybe a better product or a lower CO2 footprint, that our customers aren't willing to pay that premium. They might give you more business, you collaborate directly with them, you give more value add. So all things being equal, of course, then that's the case. We exist in the value chain, which is business to business, obviously, and a lot of the times that we're dealing with procurement, global logistic procurement, and of course the kind of drivers for these decision makers are always cost. Again, we have to look at our own cost, and that's how we as well kind of drive down our own. So again, not flag waving here, the question is really about since we can extend ourselves out to the customers of Levi's. And I really believe it's a bottom-up as well as top-down from the financial, kind of what Steve's doing. But the thing is, like, what are the top 3 things, incorporating what Ron was saying about innovate for the future? What are the top 3 things that we can innovate for the future to really drive and leverage the consumer choice to accelerate from that bottom side? So not thinking about the kind of team and accountability and empowering financial institutions, but what are the 3 things that you think, or anybody else in the panel, can really drive that to get this change that we need as quickly as possible?
Okay, very quickly, the gentleman there with his arm up.
One of the panelists talked about unlocking the knowledge that resides in companies. And yes, that's true. There's enormous potential. There's enormous knowledge. There's enormous knowledge left untapped. Now, why is that important? Because many of us are wasting enormous amount of energy reinventing the wheel, and we waste opportunities to inspire others. So I felt there should be something like a Wikipedia for SMEs, for companies to share ideas of best practices. So I approached Jimmy Wales of Wikipedia, and he was helpful, but he put me onto Wikia, which is not exactly what I hoped. I wanted to have a really independent, peer-reviewed forum where people could share ideas. So I really like that Business Council for Sustainable Development, but it's a bit focused on the big players, and I think that the smaller players...
Wrap up really quickly, sir.
Yeah, I think that the smaller players have a very valuable role to play in terms of providing peer pressure. So could you look into providing such a forum?
Okay, I think we've got to go back to the panel. Just anyone that wants to respond to top 3 things that you'd point to in response to that first question. Top 3 levers, top 3
Okay, I'll take a
catalysts.
quick crack at it. The top 3, I would say, number 1, think about, and I think you mentioned this, think about sustainability as a constraint that's going to spur innovation and R&D, right? We want to design our future products to use no harmful chemicals, right? That's a constraint, but it spurs your designers and your developers to actually look for those more sustainable alternatives. It's a great innovation. Number 2, think about scale. Think things that are going to scale with impact. Don't think about incremental results. Forget it. Incremental, we don't have time for that. And lastly, think about how you can beat your competitors on sustainable products and services, because that's going to get us there.
Anyone else chomping at the bit to add to that? Yes.
Well, just one thing I would like to add, as we think of these 3 things, we also need to look around, and one of the things we did was, we said, look, if you have to serve 10 million farmers in cotton and corn, India is going to get expensive. There's no way any company will be able to afford hundreds and thousands of feet on the ground. So what do? One of the big thing which has happened around the world and also in India, people are using mobile phones. So we established a BPO of agriculture in Mumbai with IBM and said, look, can we enroll all these farmers? So as I speak, almost 1 million farmers, actually I can send messages them, voice messages, I can send them, they can call us, they can seek advices. So I think we'll have to really see solutions beyond our own domain, and we have to see where our possible collaborations are there.
Terrific. Philippe?
Yeah, obviously we are working with small and medium companies because they are all part of the supply chain of these big players, and we are integrating them. But if I will send the 2 messages important, first we have to work seriously on reporting, and this is why this seminar is so important. We are working on this in WBCSD. We are issuing reporting matters. We should show, and second, we should reward the good student, not the bad student. So we should have a serious cost of externalities, and for the main one, CO2, the price of CO2 is a joke, a sad joke. You will not change a business with $2 a ton. It's more business to send it into the atmosphere than to work on it. So let's be serious on this, and when we are serious on this, the good pupil, the good student will work, and they will do what they are good at it, which is they will make money being sustainable and being in a sustainable way. So 2 things, reporting and cost of externalities.
Well, I want to thank you all for your patience as we went over a little bit over time, and please join me all in thanking the panelists for some tremendous insights across the wide range of issues.